DogWorks Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dog Works. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com.
Start your day tomorrow with The Daily Dog with Michelle Forto, the morning podcast on DogWorks Radio. Apple Podcast reviewer Patty Christensen calls it funny, smart, and filled with all the info I want to know about dogs. I love this show. Wake up with The Daily Dog. Available on DogWorks Radio on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your shows.
From two beautifully scenic and historic locations, the Hudson Valley, New York, and Willow, Alaska. This is the Sibe Vibe, brought to you by DogWorks Radio. Your hosts are author, journalist, and photographer, the Five Sibes mom, Dorothy Wills-Raftery, and DogWorks Radio executive producer, canine behaviorist, trainer, and lead musher of Team Aneke, Robert Forto. The Sibe Vibe is all about the magnificent breed of the Siberian Husky. From training to grooming, and for those who show and breed, from parenting to playing and rescuing Huskies in need. Whether mushing over snow-covered trails or lounging on tropical shores, even for Hollywood Sibes on the big silver screen, and so very much more. If it's about a Siberian Husky, we'll chat about it here.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Robert Forto and you're listening to the Sibe Vibe, and I am joined by my co-host Dorothy Wills-Raftery, calling in from the Hudson Valley area of New York. Dorothy, how's it going?
Hi, Robert. It's going really well, thank you. We're finally having some beautiful weather here, as I think a lot of this part of the country is finally getting. And before we jump into today's show, I just want to offer congratulations to you. I know you're getting prepared to graduate, so we wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Now, today is a pretty exciting show. I mean, families and caregivers of Siberian Huskies all know just how much a Husky can shed. And if there are folks out there who are not familiar, trust me when I say they shed enough to create another whole dog from the fur. And this I know firsthand because I actually did just that for fun and shared a picture of it over on my Five Sibes Facebook page. So the question is, what can we do with all that fur? And did anyone ever hear about cyber wool? Well, on today's show, we're going to be hearing how to make some amazing hand-knit creations from spun husky fur with our guest, Cheryl Dawson, and she's the lead cyber wool spinner for the Save Our Siberian Cyberspace Rescue Fund, and that's SOS SRF. She's also a volunteer board member and recording secretary and a husky mom. Please check out our show's website page at dogworksradio.com/the-sibe-vibe, and you can read an extended bio on Cheryl and all of her talents and see how she first came to love Siberian Husky breed, and also you can check out a really cool video over there of her spinning. And I just want to point out this year, Robert, the SOS SRF is celebrating their 20th anniversary. They formed in 1998 from a little group of Internet folks, former CyberNet members, and this organization has grown over the past 20 years to grant rescues well over $250,000 to help Huskies in need, and they just helped their 600th dog, and I think that's so amazing. And according to the SOS SRF, it all started with the idea to spin Siberian fur into yarn, cyber wool, and auction off the resulting products. So that brings us to today's show and our very talented guest, Cheryl, who will be talking with us all about how she became interested in spinning, but also how she creates cyber wool. And Robert, there's some pretty warm and beautiful items from these husky fur-based yarn to create items that are sold to help the Huskies in need. Hello, Cheryl, and welcome to the Sibe Vibe.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me.
First, I want to say congratulations to you and everyone over at Save Our Siberians on your 20th anniversary. That is amazing work that you guys do.
Well, thank you very much, and I have to thank you on behalf of all of our supporters as well. The 11 of us, could not have done that without all the people that have donated to our auction, purchased from our auction, and simply donated and had faith in us.
Absolutely, and I know I've received some nice tips from people who actually have, from rescues who have told me how you guys have helped them out, and it's really terrific. And if anyone wants to read more about them, please go over to the sossrf.org website. Cheryl, I want to jump right in and talk about how long you've been knitting, and can you tell us how and why you first became interested in spinning?
I've been knitting for well over 50 years. I started in college, and I just attended my 50th reunion last year, so it's over 50 years.
Neat.
as for spinning, I think the seeds were planted when I was in grad school at the University of Washington in Seattle, and I read an article in the paper about a family who had saved their Samoyed's fur for many years, and probably not many years given how these guys shed, and made sweaters from them. And then going to craft fairs and historical villages like Dearborn Village and Sturbridge Village and so forth, I would see spinners, and I just continued to be fascinated by it. But I thought it was going to have to wait for another life until I joined this board.
Well, I've always found the idea of cyberwolf so fascinating, and what actually gave you the idea to turn the copious amounts of fur from a Siberian Husky sheds into what is known as cyberwool?
Well, it wasn't my idea originally. It was the absolutely brilliant idea of Janet Whitesell, who was on CyberNet before I joined. And when one of the frequent threads about the awesome amounts that these dogs shed came up, she also, I should mention, recently on CyberNet, there had been some fundraising required for some rescue projects. She said, well, I'm a spinner. Why don't I spin some of this stuff into yarn, and we'll make some stuff and see if we can sell it to help rescue. And then Pat Tetrolt mentioned that on CyberNet after I had joined, and I contacted Pat and asked her if I could help. And we got started discussing it because it really hadn't quite got off the ground. It was just a gleam in Pat and Janet's eyes. And we started contacting people who had helped with another big fundraising rescue project that I had been involved with, and we formed this board of 11 people. One of them was a lawyer, and she got us started incorporating and getting our 501c3 status immediately, and it all took off from there.
That's amazing. Now, do you create the cyberwool from collected fur from your own huskies and or other huskies as well?
Both. Right now I'm mostly spinning fur from my own huskies, most of which I donate to the fund. But I do have a backlog of fur from other people's huskies as well. We also have a board member who accepts donations of fur from other people and warehouses that until we find someone to spin it.
Now, I do want to just take a moment to personally emphasize that we are talking about the fur that huskies shed when they blow their coats, not from shaving. I want to take the opportunity to say, please never shave a husky unless it is for a medical reason. You can visit my Five Sibes website to see the reasons why this is not a practice that should be done for so many reasons that are detrimental to your Siberian Husky.
Let me add, if I may,
okay, please do.
That the shaved fur or even clipped fur is not as desirable for spinning because one end of the fur will be very blunt and it makes for a pricklier yarn. It's much better to collect the fur as it comes off the dog, and heaven knows that's easy enough at certain times of year.
It is, and I think as Siberian Husky lovers and families, it's always fun when someone asks, do they really shed a lot? And I think we all have to laugh before we actually answer that question.
Are you kidding me?
Right, exactly. And then it's fun. Now, if interested folks visit the SOS SRF website, there is a frequently asked questions section to help with preparing husky fur for donation and answering many other questions about the process and the items created. Cheryl, can you tell us briefly about some of the points, and can folks donate their collected husky fur? I know you said that you have collected fur that has been groomed off to the SOS SRF, and what are the specifics for how it should be collected and mailed?
Well, as I mentioned, one of our board members loves to collect the fur and warehouse it, and her address is on our website. So if you visit our website, you will get information about where to send it. As for how to be collected and mailed, first of all, you don't need to bathe the dog unless the dog is extraordinarily filthy, and we do know how they dig, or unless the dog's extraordinarily stinky. Now, if your dog is really extraordinarily stinky, smelling like a dog, it probably has a health problem if it's a husky. So probably should consult your vet about that. But if neither of those is the case, then you just groom it and collect the fur. You should collect it lightly in paper bags or cloth bags, never in plastic. If it wasn't stinky when it went into the plastic, it will be stinky when it comes out, even though Siberians are not very stinky. So it should be collected in paper or cloth, just because there might be a little moisture in it. If you do bathe the dog, make darn sure that it is really dry before you pack it up. Let's see, well, I've got some other notes here. Don't collect the feathers from the backs of the back legs or the tail. That's way too coarse. The fur from the lower parts of the legs is way too short to spin. So the best fur, best undercoat to spin comes from the sides and especially from the back around the ruff. And you just take it off of your slicker brush or your comb and put the fluff into the paper bags. The fewer guard hairs, the less prickly the yarn will be also. So when you put it in the paper bags, you fill the paper bag. You can pat it down a little, but just don't compact it. Generally, you'll be able to get about 4 to 6 ounces into a paper bag. What I do is to write the weight of the paper bag on the bag before I start filling it. And then after I've filled it, I weigh it again, and then I know how much husky fur I have in it. Then fold over the top, tape it shut, label it, and then if you're going to send it to us, put it in a box. Don't pack it down too hard when you put it into the box. And the address to send it is on our website.
It's wonderful timing for this, too, because as we're going into this season, we're going into like a prime shedding season, so
yes.
All of this is really great for a lot of folks. I know some folks will pack it into feeders to put it out for bird nests and things, but this is a fantastic way to help other huskies and, a really perfect time of year for this. So anyone who's listening, we know huskies are going to start blowing their coats. Perfect time for it, perfect place to send it. Now, Cheryl, what types of items do you knit from the cyber wool?
Mostly smaller items like hats, mittens, half mitts that go up the arm, maybe some cowls. If we knit too large items, it takes so much fur that, or so much yarn, that we would not get as much from auctioning off that item as we would from dividing it into 2 or 3 smaller items, largely because for the labor that goes into it, it's volunteer labor, but nevertheless, the labor that goes into it, people just couldn't afford the larger items. And if we do it into smaller parcels, more people can have a chance at getting those. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say a crazy question. As we all know how warm the Siberian Husky double coat keeps them in the cold temperatures, just how cozy and warm are the wearable items that you create?
Very warm, and that's another reason for doing smaller items. I know people that have had vests or sweaters made out of their husky fur, and in fact, I have made a couple of people vests on commission and given the money to the fund, and they have told me that they absolutely cannot wear these indoors. They can only wear them outdoors. So that's another reason for doing the smaller items, because it's so warm that it needs to be an outdoor thing. The other thing is wool. We all know that wool is warm even when it gets wet, but husky fur doesn't accumulate moisture and doesn't sop up moisture the way wool does. So it stays even warmer in damp conditions than wool. So it really is ideally suited to cold weather conditions, and especially damp weather conditions.
Now, I know you're really busy spinning and knitting the cyber wool for the SOS SRF, but if someone has fur from their Siberian Husky and they would like to have it made into something personal for themselves or even into a skein of cyber wool so they can knit it themselves, do you have any suggestions on how they can go about doing that?
Yes. I personally am so overwhelmed right now that I'm really not doing any spinning except to provide yarn for things made for the fund. But there are other people who do this for pay, and they will either provide the item that you want, or they will send you the yarn to knit yourself. One suggestion I do have, if you don't have very much, if you like only a few ounces, I've been contacted by people who've had dogs that have passed and they only thought to save their fur in their last few months. So they might only have a couple of ounces. One thing that's awfully nice souvenir is a dream catcher. And so you can have it spun, and then there are people who will make it into something like a dream catcher, or some people will knit little memorial heart-shaped things that you can hang or just
put in a shadow box or something like that.
Yes.
How nice. Now, would they inquire from the website if they had a question for that? Or
they can contact me through the website, and I have a list of people that will do that.
Wonderful.
I belong to a group on Ravelry that's devoted to spinning dog fur. And,
wonderful.
And so we have a list of people who are willing to spin dog fur.
Now, Cheryl, can you briefly walk our listeners through the steps it takes you to prepare the collected shedded husky fur for spinning?
As long as the fur is relatively clean, it really is not very hard to prepare it for spinning. It takes a lot less work than it does to prepare wool straight off the sheep. It doesn't need to be scoured to remove large amounts of lanolin or anything like that. I just take the paper bag and full of fur and spread out a newspaper, spread the fur on that newspaper, and spray it with a mixture of oil and water. And the reason for that is that this stuff is fluffy, and we all know how much Siberian hair we've breathed in over the course of owning these dogs. Spraying it with the oil and water keeps it from fluffing up and flying through the air and getting in my nose while I'm spinning it. I let it dry, and then put it back in the bag and take it to the spinning wheel. So that's preparing it for the spinning process. But the other thing I need to do, some people don't do this, but I find this makes a smoother yarn, is a process called carding. And I have these large rectangles of wood with a handle, 2 of them. And on the wood there is a cloth that has teeth on it. They're very much like a slicker brush, except that they're shorter and sturdier. And I use those to fluff up the wool and prepare it for spinning. I roll it off of those into long, fluffy rolls, probably about 10 to 12 inches long and very fluffy, like 2 or 3 inches in diameter. And that's what I apply to the spinning wheel.
Now, how long a process is it to prepare the fur before it can actually be spun?
The carding takes some time. Obviously, the working of the wool and the oil and water into the wool does not take very much time. I just do it and let it sit there and dry until the oil is all that's left. But the carding does take a little time.
Now, how long of a process is it to spin, and how much husky fur does it take to, say, create a typical size skein of wool?
It's there's where your time comes in. It's a trade-off. You don't have to scour it like you have to scour wool, sheep's wool, but the spinning takes quite a bit longer. The undercoat of a Siberian Husky is not that long a fiber, and so you can't do what we call a draw very consecutively with the husky fur like you can with the wool. It also has no barbs on it like sheep's wool does to help it to cling together. So it's really, you're only depending on the twist to hold it together. And so until you have got advanced enough in your spinning to do something we call long draw, it's very tedious. It's still tedious with the long draw, but not quite so bad.
Now,
as for how much husky fur it takes to make one typical skein, a typical skein, I don't know that there is a typical skein. It depends on if you're going by the ounce.
Non-knitter.
Well,
I will admit it.
If you're going by the ounce, then 4 ounces of husky fur will produce 4 ounces of yarn, unless I have to take some out because it's too coarse or too short. But 4 ounces will produce 4 ounces. But how many yards it makes depends on how finely I spin it. So from 4 to 6 ounces of husky fur, which is about what you can usually pack into, I shouldn't say pack, but place into a paper bag, I usually get a skein of around 200 to 250 yards.
Okay. Now, what is the natural color of cyber wool? Is it based on the dog's coat colors?
Very much so.
It is,
yeah.
Okay.
If you were to show me a skein of fur from one of my dogs, I could probably tell you exactly which dog that came from. The black and white dogs, the stark black and white, the really, really black and white, have a very dark undercoat. Normally it's a kind of a charcoal brown, and it gets even darker over the back. The dilute black and whites, even though they look black and white, but we know what we mean by dilute black and white, have a kind of a pearly gray undercoat that over the back it is still that kind of charcoal dark color. So if you don't blend it too much when you card it, you'll get a kind of a heathery looking yarn. Red and white's creamy with some kind of apricot color from the back. And so it does vary a lot. I had one foster dog that was a beautiful little copper girl, and her undercoat was a very pretty pinkish tan. If we were a sheep, we'd call it a murad color. So it does. It varies completely with the
beautiful.
color of the dog.
Now, if you're just tuning in, this is the Sibe Vibe on DogWorks Radio, and we're talking with Cheryl Dawson, Siberian Husky mom, dog trainer, lead cyberwool spinner for the Save Our Siberian Cyberspace Rescue Fund. And you can read Cheryl's extended bio, watch a great video titled Shed to Threads of her spinning cyberwool, and read all about the rescue success stories and get news on their auctions to help Huskies in need over at their website at sos-srf.org. Links to all pertaining sites discussed in the show will be listed on our show's website, and again, that's at dogworksradio.com/the-Sibe-Vibe, and also over on my blog, and you can check that out with links all over on my website at 5sibes.com. Now, Cheryl, what is your favorite part of the process? Grooming the Husky, preparing the spinning, or actual knitting the items, or maybe all of it?
All of the above, except I don't enjoy the preparing as much. The carding is kind of tedious. I enjoy the spinning, but the carding takes as long as the spinning. I love to knit, and I actually enjoy grooming my Huskies. The ones we have now, our retired show dogs, they seem to enjoy the grooming as much as I do. So I do enjoy the whole process.
Now, how are these items used to help the Huskies in need through the SOS-SRF?
We take the yarn, and I don't knit all of it up myself. I send it to other people on the board that also knit. And we make things, as I mentioned, scarves, hats, mittens. I've made some boot toppers, which are really cozy. And we put them on a twice-yearly auction. One will be coming up in the middle of May. And another one happens early November, which makes a good source for Christmas gifts for people. Mm-hmm. And then we also all have a fundraising booth at the Siberian Husky Club of America's National Specialty Show, and we usually have some Siberian Husky wool items on our silent auction at that rescue booth.
Now, how do people find out about the auction? Can they participate in the auction? Is this something that's on your website, on your Facebook page? What is the best way?
The links are on both places, but you do have to register in order to bid, so that we have your email and contact information. Let me mention that you will receive probably fewer than 10 emails per year if you do this. So we're not going to spam you, and we do not share this list at all, period. So you're not going to get spammed by anyone else by being on our list. It's a very private list.
I can totally attest to that because I am registered for that, and it's great. You certainly do not get overwhelmed with emails. Actually, very contrary to that. So
we do offer a newsletter these days, and you can opt out of that newsletter when you register. You will opt in if you register, but you can opt out. As for payment, we do PayPal or checks. We don't take charge cards for that unless you do it through PayPal.
Now, I know we talked before, and we know that Siberian Huskies are virtually odor-free, as you said, unless there could be, maybe something medically wrong and they should have it checked. But I know folks will still ask a question if the finished items have any kind of a doggy odor, because it's something that they'll be wearing. So I know that's a popular question, and I just thought maybe you could address that.
It is a question I get largely from people who don't own Siberian Huskies. No, there is really no more odor. I mean, we all know that a Siberian Husky, when it gets wet, just smells like a wet sweater. Mm-hmm. And the usual question I get is, well, if they get wet, how smelly are they? And my answer is usually, first of all, the facetious, have you ever smelled a wet sheep? But
I have, so.
So I usually tell them it's not any smellier than the dog is itself when it gets wet, and Siberian Huskies just smell like a wet sweater. The other thing is that it is also, in some ways, less allergenic, unless you're allergic to dogs. It's less allergenic than wool. So people who cannot wear wool often find that they can wear Siberian Husky fur items. Now, and I also get the question, if I'm allergic to dogs, can I wear it? Most of the allergies to dogs comes from their saliva or their dander. And first of all, Siberian Huskies are really not very bad about that. But secondly, this wool the yarn is washed in extremely hot water and rinsed back and forth between hot and cold several times in order to really get it to cling together and not shed as much as the Huskies do. So there really isn't much saliva or dander left in the yarn by the time you wash it that way.
You know, that actually leads to a good point. Do these is there any sheds from the sweaters or the materials?
There is a little bit. One of the things that I do is something I wouldn't dare do with wool, and that is to when I wash the yarn, I actually put it after washing it in with Dawn detergent, which is pH neutral. I actually put it in very hot water, and I take a little mini plunger to it, and I try to felt it just a little bit, and then shock it by going it back and forth between hot water and cold water in order to keep the yarn from shedding. And it really does help to keep it from shedding, but yes, it does shed a little bit.
Now, what is your most favorite item you've created so far from the Husky fur, and, you know, does it have a meaning for you?
I think every item that I have is from one of my dogs. So I really love it as it is. It's special. But I had one dog that was really my heart dog. She was my companion dog. I had taken her to a companion dog title, AKC companion dog title. And I have a long, long scarf that was knitted from her fur. And it's so special every time I wrap that around my neck.
Oh, it's like a hug.
Like a hug. And she used to do that. She used to put her chin over my shoulder and give me a hug. And the other one that I really love is a hat that I made from the fur of a 15-year-old dog that we took in at age 15. Her master had cirrhosis of the liver and knew that he was going to die before she did. And she came to live with us for a couple of years, about a year and a half. And I groomed her and made a hat that I really, really liked from her fur. So every time I put it on my head, I think about Coco.
Oh, that's wonderful. Now, before I wrap up the show, Robert, I just wanted to see I know you have like 50 Huskies up there, so if you want to know ever what to do with your fur, but I just wanted to see if you had anything else to add before I close out.
Robert, there is someone in Alaska who does this. I don't have her name right here, but I could get it for you if you want to do that. And I think she also donates to rescue groups in Alaska. So.
You know, I've seen her work. She does some really cool trapper-type hats that the mushers wear. I think those are absolutely beautiful. But my question is, do you ever dye the wool? And if you do, what type of products do you use for that?
Dyeing the wool, I have not dyed them, except one of my other hobbies, and everyone goes, what, at this, is I use mushrooms to make dye baths. And I've tried it on Husky fur just because the mushroom dyes will only dye protein fibers. So I said, well, would it dye Husky fur? But I don't really want to dye it because it comes in such beautiful colors as it is.
Right.
And I think you would lose the
90 seconds
of it if you dyed it. You can get all kinds of beautiful dyed wool, so why dye the Siberian Husky fur?
Right, for sure. That's all I have, Dorothy. I think it's an awesome way to raise funds for the rescue, and like she said, definitely a labor of love for sure to make products like this.
Absolutely. And, Robert, I just want to add a footnote to today's story. My 5 Vibes tale, Getting Healthy with Harley, Learning About Health and Fitness, the illustrated children's
60
book. That's
seconds.
a perennial fundraiser for the SOS SRF. And for the remainder of 2018, I want to double my donation of $2 per book now for each book sold to the SOS SRF in celebration of their 20th anniversary. people can visit the publishing house at articastpublishing.com and to purchase the book there. There's also a link right through the SOS SRF's website, but on the Arctic House Publishing site, there's a link for people can buy it through either PayPal or Amazon. And as I said, it's always a perennial one, but for this year, I want to double it to $2 per book. So I hope folks will check that out. And
thank you very much, Dorothy. We appreciate that.
Absolutely. And Cheryl, you've been such an amazing talent, and I just love the idea of turning all that fur from Huskies, blown coats, into such wonderful
10 seconds.
And what a wonderful way for Husky families to kind of pay it forward and, help other Huskies in need. And I want to just thank you so much for being on the Sibe Vibe and sharing your story with us.
My pleasure, Dorothy. Thank you for inviting me.
And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to this episode of the Sibe Vibe. And remember, please, to share the link to the show that we'll be posting. And you can also listen to and download our shows from over on Apple Podcasts. So see you next month, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Did you know that Alaska Dog Works trains service dogs for those in need throughout North America? Each and every service dog that is trained through the Lead Dog Service Dog Program and Michelle Forto and her team has an individual training plan. We train for autistic, mobility, psychiatric, and PTSD for our soldiers for service work. If you know of someone that may need a service dog, please take a moment and check out Alaska Dog Works on social media and at alaskadogworks.com.
Hi, this is Alex Stein, co-host of Mushing Radio on Dogworks Radio. We just completed our first storytelling season on the 1925 Serum Run. Almost 100 years later, the 1925 Serum Run is something that is still inspirational, amazing, and in many ways larger than life. We've gathered all of these episodes together on one page to make it easier for you to listen to them in order. Just go to dogworksradio.com/serumrun. That's SERUMRUN, no space, dogworksradio.com/serumrun. And while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe to Dogworks Radio at Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever it is that you go to listen to podcasts.
If you like our podcast, there are a few things you can do. You can take a couple of minutes and go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also check out all of our Dogworks Radio sponsors and promotions in our show notes. Another thing you can do is go over to Facebook, like our Facebook page, and one last thing, please tell all of your friends by spreading the word about Dogworks Radio. Thank you so much for listening to us. We really appreciate you.
Dogworks Radio is produced by Robert Forto. Logo art by Angry Squirrel Studios. Dogworks Radio is produced in conjunction with KVRF 89.7 in Palmer, Alaska.
For dog training advice, you can contact Alaska Dogworks at 907-841-1686 or visit their website at alaskadogworks.com. If you have a show idea or would like to be a guest, please contact us by sending an email to live@dogworksradio.com.